So Sabbath doesn't release an album for 3 more years, and Tony Iommi wants to do a solo project. He works with Glenn Hughes as well as with some others in a very interesting lineup. I think Eric Singer was in the band too from Kiss and Badlands. Really good album, comes out called Seventh Star, but the record company wants to call it Black Sabbath featuring Tony Iommi. Pretty good album.
Yeah, that was a strange one. It really didn't sound like Sabbath. And they wanted to just have it be an Iommi solo album, but I guess the record company insisted on having Black Sabbath's name on it. And that was kind of a different one.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? It's Eric EJD715. I'm gonna give you this rundown of could be the most controversial era of Black Sabbath, you may say. My personal favorite, but it's an era that some people really like, some people just kind of forget about. This is the era between like 1986 and 1991. It's the Tony Martin era, Black Sabbath. Now, Tony Martin had huge shoes to fill after Dio left. However, Dio and he also had Glenn Hughes on a record. But I think Tony Martin was other than Ozzy and Dio, I think Tony Martin he's just right up there with those guys. He held his own, as you can hear in the background.
The next year, in 1987, the Eternal Idol release, originally recorded with Ray Gillen's vocals, ended up being replaced by Tony Martin's vocals, thus beginning the Tony Martin era in Black Sabbath, which would go on for 3 or 4 albums with 1 interruption. Didn't take long to warm up to Tony Martin at all. Great fit, good polished guitar work in there, and his vocals just kind of matched the band's sound.
Tony Martin, Jeff Nichols on keyboards, Dave Spitz and Bob Daisley on bass, Bev Bevan on drums, which is the drummer from ELO. Eric Singer also plays on this album too.
I find myself appreciating Tony Martin era albums a lot more than I did back when I first heard them. I was guilty of tuning out the band because it wasn't the original Sabbath or it wasn't the Dio Sabbath and automatically, not counting them. So I'm guilty of that, and I'm trying to rectify that right now by listening to a lot more Sabbath, especially the later years, and finding a whole new appreciation for them.
Now the one after it was amazing, which is the title track you hear in the background, Headless Cross. This is a 1989 original pressing from BMG Records. Fantastic album from start to finish. You've got Headless Cross, which is an amazing song as you hear in the background. Devil and Daughter, which is another track after that. When Death Calls, fantastic song. And then the last song called Nightwing is fantastic. On this album, he brought in Kazi Powell, the famous drummer who's now not with us. Jeff Nichols on keyboards and bassist Lawrence Cottle. Never heard of that guy, but solid lineup, solid album. This is a great heavy metal album in my opinion. This is up there with my humble opinion, like Heaven and Hell. It's that good. So for those of you that don't have any Tony Martin era Sabbath, if you want to get one to start with, this would be your best one.
Yeah, but Headless Cross and Eternal Idol. That period of time, they were pretty good. Cross Purposes, those were good albums. Way overlooked.
A new decade, a new album. This time the album's called Tear. A lot of fans started to disconnect with the Sabbath sound here, or this album is really underappreciated.
From 1990, here is Black Sabbath's TYR, Tear. I've always called it Tear. Now let's not split hairs, because packing a huge Heaven and Hell Sabbath era vibe, this is the third. It's the third release with Tony Martin at the mic. And it's the one that just summits. It finally reaches the top of that epic metal mountain, Valhalla! And it stands face to face with Odin, ready for battle. It's based on Norse mythology. And while we all know concept albums are lost on LJ, see ya. But for that, thankfully, it's just as easy to enjoy this one as a string of catchy, powerful Sabbath tracks with no deep thinking required. Some absolutely fantastic Martin era tracks here like Lawmaker, Jerusalem, and Valhalla. Huge riffs, just like you'd expect from Tony Iommi. thundering drums from Cozy Powell, and Tony's own vocals are always epic. I actually really dig the stuff he did with Sabbath, and I know that separates Sabbath fans right down the middle, but this one is right up there with the best of the albums that he did with that band.
So 3 albums in, Tony Martin is thinking the world is fine. I've got 3 Sabbath albums under my belt. What could go wrong? Well, Dio could come knocking. Out of nowhere, Dio comes in and records Dehumanizer. There were some rumors going around that Dio might join the band, but everybody was really pretty skeptical until it really happened. They had a great song with Computer God, and then also TV Crime that was featured on Wayne's World, the movie, and then also on the Wayne's World soundtrack.
Yeah, Dehumanizer, that one kind of stuck out because it was in a time period of a lot of change, and then all of a sudden Dio came back, and that one kind of sticks out in there.
So let's talk Black Sabbath's 16th album, 1992's Dehumanizer. With this album, you see the return of the Mob Rules era band. You've got Ronnie James Dio on vocals, Appice is back on drums, and after almost a decade out of the band himself, you've got Geezer Butler back on bass. This is a totally different sound than really any album that they had ever done. Coming into the album, Dio and Iommi had decided that they wanted to mix the sound of early 70s Black Sabbath with the writing and stylings of Heaven and Hell. And they do a great job of blending those. Tony Iommi even pulled out his the SG that he used on Paranoid to give it that 70s sound that they were really looking for. It's a really cool mix because you get all the different eras of Black Sabbath in this one album. You've got the more upbeat metal sound on songs like TV Crimes and Time Machine. And then you've got some really good mid-pace groovers like Computer God and Master of Insanity. Computer God being one of the bigger hits off of this album. And then finally you've got the doomier sounding 70s sounding songs like After All and Letter from Earth. After All is probably my favorite song on this album. And then you've got songs like which kind of mix that. They're kind of a perfect blend of the 70s and the early 80s Black Sabbath. This is a very underrated album, and it gets really mixed reviews. I've seen people that list this as their favorite Black Sabbath album, and I've seen people that list this at the bottom. I put it right in the middle, and it's definitely right there. It falls right behind Mob Rules in the Dio era. But it's kind of hard to compare this to Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules because it's a totally different sound than either of those. However, the music is phenomenal. The songwriting is amazing. The band as a whole sounds awesome. Like I said, this is probably the most in-your-face album. Definitely from Ronnie James Dio era Black Sabbath, but it's probably one of the more in-your-face albums from Black Sabbath as a whole. And definitely one of the heaviest across the board. And it's one that's not to be missed. If you haven't given this album a chance, this is one that you should definitely have in your collection.
Then fast forward to 93, Dio leaves the band again, and they bring Tony Martin in back in 93. 1994, they record the Cross Purposes album, which is a very solid album. It's not up to par with the first 2 Tony Martin era albums, but it's still very good. This album features Tony Martin. Geezer Butler's back in the fold. I guess they retained him from the Dehumanizer sessions. Bobby Rondinelli on drums, and Jeff Nichols is back on keyboards.
Tony Martin comes back to do one final album with Sab, Forbidden. I really like the Forbidden album. It has the songs I Won't Cry For You that end side 1, and then also Rusty Angels on side 2. I really like those 2 tracks, but really like the whole thing. Ice-T makes a small appearance on the first track, Illusion of Power, and the artwork on it is just phenomenal. I recently scored a copy of it thinking it was an original. I paid up for it, but I got a little sting when I looked at the dead wax and realized that it was an unofficial reissue.
I don't think there are any bad Black Sabbath albums. There are none that are bad. Some are better than others, that's all it is.
Tony Iommi decides to hire Ernie C as his producer, which is the guitar player from Body Count. And nothing against Body Count. I think Body Count's actually a pretty cool band. But I think Ernie C had some influence on Tony Martin's songwriting and Tony Iommi's songwriting for that matter. A couple of the tracks, I think one of the tracks on this album actually has to have a rap section in it. But this is 1995's Forbidden. This is a Brazilian bootleg. It's on, I think it's on black vinyl. Yep, black vinyl. Made just like the old I.R.S. label. The lineup on this album, I couldn't find who was on it. But I know, of course, Tony Martin's in. I think Bobby Rondinelli is still on the drums. I think Geezer Bauer left by this time because he went on to form the Geezer project with Burton C. Bell of Fear Factory on vocals. So I'm not familiar with who's on this lineup. It's nowhere on the jacket of this record, but the album as a whole, it's okay. It's just okay. Tony Martin sounds great on it, but overall, it's just an okay album. You can see that their time with Tony Martin, the path has gone, was a worn path at that point. So they decided to break up.
An unlikely 18 years later, Ozzy, Iommi, and Geezer get back together and record 13. Unable to work out a deal with Bill Ward, unfortunately. I wish they could bury the axe and get back together and split the money 4 ways equally, or whatever the issue was that Bill had. Really would have liked to see that, because you just really feel that that's missing. But with Ozzy's vocals back in Sabbath and playing that album and hearing that again on the radio, it was an amazing feeling. I really like the track on the album, Damaged Soul. Check that one out again if you kind of looked over it. So an unlikely 50 years later, 3 of the 4 original members of Black Sabbath are touring. Going into 2016, early 2017, we will see Black Sabbath live for the last time. Just kind of as a memento to the fans, earlier this year in March, they released a CD called The End. It had 4 additional tracks on it from the 13 album that were previously unreleased, and then also some live cuts on it as well. I thought those songs were really good too, and I thought any one of those songs from the End EP could have been swapped out with 13 and been fine. So that's my Black Sabbath collection. I think there's 19 studio albums in there. I want to thank you for watching both parts of this video, and if you made it this far, you are truly a Black Sabbath fan. I want to send a special thank you to those who contributed videos to the project. I really appreciate that. You helped take this video to the next level, absolutely. And I want to give a special thank you to my friend Captain, who took time out of his day after working a long shift to come over to the house and talk music and talk Sabbath as well, and share some of the memories that he had with some of the early Sabbath albums. Keep listening to music, and also I want to leave you just with one question. Is it really the end?
So what's the future of Black Sabbath?
It's the end.
Supposedly the end. I think they're still going to do stuff. I mean, something will come out. I don't think it's the end.